All right, we just gotta wait for Instagram as always. Steve's favorite, Instagram. Super quiet. All right, Facebook went.
Funny thing.
Facebook went.
I'm nervous.
Instagram went. You're really nervous?
No, I just like to say it.
I know. All right, good to go. All right, guys, we are back on and live with the Outdoor Drive. We actually have Jake joining us from New England Naturals. How we doing, Jake?
We're doing good. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. I know it's tough to get off the trap line and kind of kick it back a little bit and a little bit relaxed. And you should be skinning and fleshing in the in the fur shed.
It's probably good for the health to take a break from time to time.
I know you're probably halfway through your season now. I mean,
yeah, we got until April 10, and so we're about. I'd say we're halfway through our ice season. I kind of break my trap into two like mental things, or maybe three: land trapping in the fall, then ice trapping after deer season, and then the spring run, which is when all the ice breaks up and the beavers really get active.
That you get to trap until April. That must be nice.
Yeah, it's a really long trapping season. So our season actually runs from October 15th until April 10th. Part of that is because we're iced up for 3/4 of that, traditionally at least. And this year's no different. We've had ice for the majority. So that keeps a lot of people, as far as the pressure on the population, keeps a lot of people, from actually trapping during that time period.
It's actually so for us, we are over March 15th. So it makes it really hard. So that last week is like it's like the best of the best, and you just
Right.
better hope that all of your traps are firing that last week, because that's when all the magic happens. But I wish we had it just a little bit longer. I think that
Yeah.
it would extend. Something really good could happen.
Is your breeding season in full swing in March?
Well, not really. It doesn't. I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't know. I just know that the trapping is incredible.
Yeah.
That
Like,
time of the year, the last couple
super
of weeks.
territorial.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
a lot of like your caster mount sets and stuff are on fire.
On
I
fire.
mean, that thing could go off every single night for the whole entire week or 2 weeks. And that time of year, the last week of February, first 2 weeks of March. I mean, it's lights out.
So that's the exact same thing for me, just push it back 4 weeks.
Right.
So the last 2 weeks of March, first 2 weeks of April, I could, if I was a smart man, I'd give up ice trapping and I'd put all my energy into those 3 weeks and, probably produce the same number of pelts.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane, and I don't know what it would be like if we were to be, a month later, right? Like, could it
Right.
be better? But everyone talks about it, like make sure your traps are firing because things are
Mhm.
getting good, and that those last couple of weeks of the season. I mean, you could double your numbers in
Yeah.
no time. So, let's get this thing right into four-wheel drive. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, where you're from, and a little bit about what you do?
Yes, my name is Jake DeBow with New England Naturals, and we're located in northern New Hampshire. We kind of spread into Maine, Vermont, and that's why I went with New England Naturals when we were originally founding the company. But we kind of have two sides to New England Naturals. One is social media education and advocacy around trapping, and the other side is making fur products. We have a furrier shop, so we're creating mittens and hats and other garments out of fur, and those are kind of the two pillars of New England Naturals.
So, do you do that with your own furs, or like people can send you furs and you can tan and make stuff for them?
Yeah, so no tanning. We don't do any
Okay.
tanning, and that's the one part of the process that we don't touch. So if people order, a pair of mittens, a muff, whatever it may be, from us, that's made with our fur, but they can also send us their fur, and we can make products. And as things have begun to grow, we're starting to source some more beavers in particular, but some more fur from local trappers in the area, but keeping it New England. And, it's cool kind of building a community of trappers and utilizing fur that's, just from New England.
Which is super cool because honestly, it brings back that tradition that we've all been built on. I mean, like, New England is known for the trapping of the beaver and trapping of a lot of animals. And it's kind of cool is the further you go north, the different animals that start to, like, there's animals that you have that I don't, and vice versa.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. And, some of those we can utilize here in New Hampshire. We're right on that fringe of kind of that boreal forest. So, like over in Maine, you can trap marten, you can trap bobcats, and those are things that I'd love to tackle someday. But in New Hampshire, while we have marten, we have a robust marten population. We can't trap them.
That's us with bobcats. So we have like an overabundance of bobcats, and if you're land trapping at any point of the season, you're going to catch a bobcat. I
Yeah.
mean, it was, it was maybe 10 years ago. You might see one, or you hear of a trapper, 100 miles away. Oh, I got a bobcat, and now it's every single one of them is posting up a picture on some type of website that they've caught a bobcat, or it seems like it's weekly.
Yeah.
And the overabundance of them.
We're running into the same thing here in New Hampshire. We don't have a bobcat season. That's purely political, not biological.
I
And
agree.
yeah, and it's unfortunate because I haven't seen a fox track in a while, haven't seen a fisher track in a while, but I can't. I literally have bobcats that steal carcasses from my fur shed. Like I'm throwing my hat at bobcats trying to get them out of the yard.
So you just brought up a pretty cool point, is when it comes to bobcats and fishers and bobcats and foxes. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit? Like,
Yeah, and I mean it's a little bit more theory than it is data. Like I don't have something to cite right off the bat, but we know, for example, we'll use like wolves and coyotes. Like when you have a landscape that has wolves in it, your coyote population takes a dive because they're competing for the same food sources, and two, there's direct mortality on those. But your foxes will do really well because the coyotes aren't high on the landscape. If you have coyotes on the landscape, your foxes take a beating, and it's the same thing with bobcats. You have bobcats are New England's only true carnivore. So your fisher will eat a berry, your coyote will eat a berry. All these other animals are really, really omnivores when you think about it, which means they'll eat both meat and fruits and veggies. But a bobcat is your only true carnivore, and they're really effective killers. And so both from direct mortality, we know that a large bobcat will predate on a small fisher. And vice versa, though, to be fair, like a big fisher will predate on a small bobcat, but that competition is happening. And so whenever you get populations that go kind of out of whack, right? Like one that is not managed, you see other species take a hit.
so the big thing that's going on here is we had brought back the populations of fisher cats, and they boomed forever, and then they allowed us to trap 3 or 5, whatever, and then whatever happened, I don't know. Somehow the bobcats overpopulated, and they came out of nowhere. Whether they brought more or what they did, who knows? We'll leave that to another day. But now we have an overpopulation of bobcats, and literally everybody's and all the trappers are like, I can't catch fishers. I can't find fishers. Now they're doing a fisher study to see where they went. But I mean, it's written in stone here. I mean, this is not a secret, and that's why I kind of wanted you to kind of touch on that point. Like,
and that fisher and bobcat relationship has been, we know what happens when you have a bunch of fish on the landscape. You're probably not seeing a lot of bobcats, and vice versa.
That's pretty crazy. So where did it start for you as far as New England Naturals, and like where did it begin, and why did you even start it?
Yeah, New England Naturals is a quintessential like started in my mother's basement type thing. And so so my wife has a background in natural product chemistry, and she was really into chaga. If you've not heard of chaga, it's a medicinal mushroom. You make teas and tinctures out of it. So we made a bunch of tincture, and we made too much. We made like 5 gallons. And this is the kind of stuff where, you would go through a quart in a year. So we said, hey, how can we get rid of some of this? And we decided to start an Etsy page. So it all started with, an Etsy page and a medicinal mushroom. And I had some moose antlers because I was doing my moose research at the time. And, we chopped those up and sell them as dog chews. I was getting my master's in Vermont. Riley was getting her PhD in Rhode Island. I was from New Hampshire. She was from Maine. And so we said, well, what fits all this? New England Naturals. So it really started as just a way to move a couple products, kind of almost a side hustle, you might say. And then 2017, I caught, I don't know, call it 20 beavers. And went to sell them into the market and was offered, this was at like the bottom of the barrel prices. It was offered $12 a piece for them. And it broke my heart because, as you guys know, the amount of effort that goes into catching, skinning, fleshing a beaver, you're pouring your heart and your soul into that thing. And for $12, it's an insult. So the next year we call it another, I don't know, 20, 30 beavers, and we sent them out to get made into products. So we paid someone to tan them and then to make them into products, and we sold those through our Etsy. Well, that did pretty well. We were able to at least make our money back, make a little bit more on our beavers. And then COVID hit, and we sold, again, this is all just like kind of side hustle peddling stuff.
Of course.
We were picking fiddleheads down in which is a fern bud, and selling them on the side of the road at my mother's house because everyone was back home. Riley moved in. It was, this is early COVID, and we made enough selling fiddleheads to buy a fur sewing machine. And we kind of had that complex of like, oh, we could sew that. We had no background in sewing, but we did. And we fumbled our way through it. This thing shows up on the back of an 18-wheeler, and we're like, oh no, what did we do? But so that kind of started us on to getting our own fur tanned and then trying to make products out of it. And we knew nothing. We were kind of just very self-taught at the beginning. And I think it was 2022 maybe. Riley said, hey, the world is happening on social media. And so if we want to, sell some products, we need to get on social media. And she forced me into making a TikTok, which at the time I'm like, Chinese thing, I don't want anything to do with it. And she goes,
You
yeah,
sound like all of us.
She goes, hey man, shit or get off the pot. Like this is even, this is where the life is happening. So
Right.
let's do it. So we made a couple videos, and geez, they hit, and we saw some interest in the products we were making. And then as we began to kind of get into the social media thing, we realized that there was this gap of education specifically about trapping. And so we started making a couple really simple how-to videos, but not trying to talk to another trapper, trying to talk to the deer hunter that's interested in trapping. And those, kind of started getting more and more interest. And then we moved to Instagram, expanded onto YouTube, and had a couple videos that just went berserk. There's a video of me tacking out a beaver set to a Dolly Parton song, and I think we posted it twice. I think between the platforms, it's like over 80 million views, between those two times. And so there's an interest, and we kind of saw that interest. We said, okay, how can we make this information consumable to your average person? Again, not necessarily the trapper, but to someone who knows nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
How can we make it slightly entertaining? And it just continued to grow, and it hasn't stopped.
So do you think that it's like a curiosity thing, as far as like curiosity of what it is, because like the lack of information that's out there, like they might not trap, but they just are curious to like see what it is because of ignorance? Or is it guys that want to trap and they're really honestly trying to dive in and learn?
I think it's a mixture of all of the above. I think there's a lot of people that are just interested in trapping. They may look at what they're doing right now and, hey, maybe life's busy and they've got some kids and I can only deer hunt for 10 days a year. That's my thing. But boy, I'd love to trap someday. There's that type of interest. I also think there's just an innate interest in trapping. I mean, it's part of what we've been doing as a culture since forever.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this missing piece for a lot of people of capturing wildlife and then utilizing them, utilizing that, whether it be for food, for fur, for scents, for all sorts of things, for decoration, for cultural reasons. And so people who may not necessarily be doing that, but may have an interest in it, here's a little gleam into what that looks like, and how, hey, if they have the time, if they have the resources, if they want to jump into it, here's how you could do that.
And I think that, the good thing about trapping, right? Like you could set one trap, and then that could be the one thing. Like you could
Absolutely.
go check one beaver trap and just kind of dive yourself into it and try and find your way to do it. You could set one land trap, you could set one cage trap, or you could set 25. Like you can take it as far as you want. And I think a lot of people, kind of bite off more than they can chew when they start off at
Mhm.
it, and they do like 25 traps. And that's, if you get a lot of animals, then there's a lot of work that comes behind this. Like,
Yeah, so there's a part of that barrier of entry to trapping isn't necessarily just learning. Well, first off, it's the rules and regulations. Trapping is the most regulated form of take that exists, and so just in order to go out there and trap, you have to be very educated. And so there's that barrier, but you can get through that just by reading books and studying. Then there's the capturing an animal, and that's another skill set. You got to learn the animal. You got to learn their, what they do, what drives them, why they do these things, and then make a set specific to, capture that animal. All right, you catch an animal, it's awesome. You're on top of the world. You're feeling great. Now you bring back to the fur shed or into the kitchen, for a lot of people, and there's a whole nother skill set that needs to be learned there of fur handling. And so it is really involved. And so part of what we try to do is break things down and take it from, instead of this daunting task, like just piece by piece. Hey, let's catch your animal and then let's go from there. All right, now let's just skin it. Let's go from there and just break it down.
And it makes you more of a sportsman and an outdoorsman. I think that a trapper in itself, or a successful trapper, is something, as an outdoorsman or sportsman or a steward of the land, like there is nobody else that walks this face of the earth that has those skill sets. Like, because to take an animal, right, say a beaver, and get them in an 8x8 square, or to get a coyote to touch a 1x1 circle, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Oh yeah.
there is a skill set there, like, to understand the motions of that animal, and making, I mean, anybody, I'd hate to say this, and I know I'm going to get ridiculed for this, but anybody can shoot a deer at 150 yards in a cornfield, but like getting a coyote or a fox to commit their lives to a 1x1 circle.
Yeah.
You can take it a step further. Guys struggle to get a coyote within 150 yards,
Right.
let alone step on a 1.5 by 1.5 inch circle.
Yeah, it takes an immense understanding of that animal, and it's why trappers have always kind of been on the forefront of the outdoor realm, right? Like the first people to head west were the trappers. The first people that state agencies turn to when things are going south with wildlife is the trapper. And so it is, and it makes you look at the landscape so differently, because you start. I'm an avid deer hunter. I love deer hunting. Nothing is deer hunting, right? That's like I live and breathe it during the month of November. But when my brain is thinking deer, I'm thinking at a macro level. I'm thinking about ridges. I'm thinking about valleys and rivers. When I'm thinking about a fisher, I'm thinking about softwood corridors. I'm thinking about the specific trees. When I'm thinking about otter, I'm looking at pinch points and slides between wetland systems that, like you said, are 12 by 12 inches. And it just narrows you down into the life of that animal.
And you're looking for those, like with a deer hunter, you're looking for game trails and all of this, where on a full scale, like this deer is going to follow this contour line and do this, and you're looking at it under a microscope when it comes to trapping, like trying to figure out. It's as simple as a small pebble the size of a golf ball that can get something to step a foot into one area, or one stick that can get a beaver to swim in one direction.
Duck
Like,
his head just right.
it's crazy. I mean, and to understand that and to get to know that, it takes time and it's frustrating. I mean, when you first started trapping, how long did it take you to grasp it? Like, how
Oh.
long did it take you to understand that? Like,
I still don't.
it's
Like I'm still learning constantly.
Mhm,
I feel more confident in my ability with specific sets.
mhm.
But the other beautiful thing about trapping is, again, not to continue to keep beating up on the deer hunter,
It's
but
okay.
with
Poor
deer,
deer
right,
hunters.
you're
Over here, buddy.
and I think I can beat on him because I am one, truly.
Yeah.
But you're thinking about one animal, right? And it's a complex animal, and it's specifically mature bucks. But when you're a trapper, you're thinking about 20 animals. You're thinking about fish, you're thinking about mink, muskrat, otter, beaver, all these things. And depending on how much you trap and what animals you trap, but it gets you into the minds of every single one of those animals. And again, how to break down everything. And it just, so there's always something new to learn, right? Like
Mhm.
say you figure out coyotes, which I'm not saying I have, and I don't know that I ever will, but say you do. Well, there's 23 other species of fur bears that you can, turn your attention to master. And so there's always something to learn. There's always something to see. You know, every little bit of fresh mud, I'm sure as trappers, you just innately, you're walking down a street, you see a culvert, and you glance down at that little mud patch on the edge. Just, is there a raccoon track there? Is there a mink track there? You're always looking year round.
Jake, all right, I got to ask you this though. As a deer hunter, are you a bow hunter or just do you gun hunt?
I cut my teeth on like my first addiction in the outdoor world was bow hunting. And then I picked up tracking, and that's kind of taken all of my, the amount of time I get off from work, I put it all into chasing snow and chasing whitetails.
So I guess my question is, like, talk about like micro and macro, right? When it comes to deer hunting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you not find that honing in on that micro location as a trapper, you don't like roll that over to your deer hunting? So like you're
100%.
like you have this ridge, and like this is a good ridge, like there's deer up here, there's oak flat, they're gonna feed, but then as a bow hunter, you still have to find that micro location where they're gonna come off that ridge to ambush them, which I feel, I mean, it might be in a bigger scale than trapping, but it's the same concept, right? Like you have this creek bottom, but like where in this creek bottom am I going to catch this otter?
Yeah, you're spot on. And I think that being a trapper makes you better at hunting everything else.
Right.
You know, it makes you think about bear movements on years of good acorns completely different than I did, you know, before I ever targeted predators with trapping. And so I think, again, it always keeps you honed in, because there's so many animals you're looking for. Two, you're kind of looking for really minute sign, and you kind of spread that out to a larger scale, and all of a sudden you can break that ridge down in your head a little bit easier, or you're picking up on things that, you know, well, why is the deer going to do that? You know,
right.
They reacted this way. What was up with that? And just, yeah, I think it all comes together at the end, right? We're all pursuing animals and picking up on what they do, why they do it, and then trying to make change our movements to capture on that. But yeah, they're all related.
Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at. Is like, I don't think anything, no matter what you're hunting, I don't think trapping has got to be the one thing that hones your skills to spill over to all your other outdoor endeavors, you know?
Agreed.
And I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. You know what I'm saying? And how many failures, and being able to try it over and making sure to get it absolutely right. Like, there's a lot. Like, it's a frustrating thing. It can break a man. I'm telling you, it can break a man.
And that's why I really encourage everyone, and it's difficult, but find a mentor, because the learning curve, you can flatten your learning curve so much faster by finding a mentor, following them along, saying, why did you do that? You know, it's something as simple as a step stick on a coyote. Oh no, you want to put that before the set or after the, you know, whatever it is. Or as simple as, no, you want your dive stick for a beaver to be at least the size of your coffee can. Don't go any smaller because of X, Y, or Z. And you hear it once and you don't have to learn the hard way. You know, like dive sticks on beaver, I learned the hard way. And then finally someone told me, oh yeah, no, big dive stick. And it's changed my opinion, and it's increased my catch substantially on specific sets.
There is those little tiny things, and I guess you just kind of forget about them, but somebody once showed you, and you just do it. You know what I'm saying? And it changes you though. Like, we're huge. Are you a big foothold guy for beavers, or are you a big conibear guy for beavers?
I use both. I'm using body grips under ice mostly, but once the water opens up, I'm using a lot of footholds on submersion devices. Yeah.
So the thing with us for like a foothold is you can't really educate too many beavers with a foothold over a 330. Like, it's an all or nothing thing, right? Like, you can catch a mature beaver with a foothold, right? Like, and when in a nuisance situation, it's easier to get them up and out of there with a foothold than it is a 330 sometimes.
Yeah, and it's, you know, yeah.
No, go ahead, please. No, please go ahead, rip on it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Please.
So, you know, just for a little bit back, we're talking about educating beavers. So a beaver can be one of the easiest animals to catch from like an early trapper, right? Like, you're getting into it, one of the easiest animals to catch. They see a body grip snap in their face once, they become the hardest animal to catch in the woods. And so it's little things like that. Now that you're not going to avoid that. You're going to have to learn that the hard way a dozen times. I still learn. I'll show up, to an open water set and it's sprung, and it's like, okay, this just turned into a completely different experience, you know, and immediately. But yeah, no, I love both of those tools, and I use both of those tools as much as I can. You can be a bit more discreet when you're running footholds, especially if you're in areas, near roads or near trails. Everyone's got a dog that they're walking now. And as a
Mhm.
trapper, it's on us to make sure that we're taking those extra steps just to keep those sets that much further away from dog walking trails, from the public's eye. And footholds can be a good way for beaver, because just for the audience, when you're using a foothold for beaver, it's submerged below the level of the water. And I don't know what your laws are
We're
about body
submerged with
grips.
330s also. We
That's
have to be
tough.
fully submerged.
Yeah, that's challenging. We're half. It has to be half submerged, and that half makes a huge difference.
Is 330 the biggest that you can use?
There's no upper limit restriction. We just have minimum
Okay.
restrictions. Yeah. So I mean,
Yes.
they make like the 330 supers and stuff that are
Yeah,
wide.
we can't use them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they have to be square. So that they give us like what's a I'm drawing a blank. 330. How wide is a 330? A regular, or how high is a 330?
It's I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it 330 millimeters or something
I
from
think
side
that's
from
what it.
corner
I
to
think that's what.
corner?
But that's
I
our.
should know the answer
No,
to
no, no.
that.
I think it's 12 by 12, right? So or
12 and
whatever,
3/4.
or whatever. What is it?
12 and 3/4.
So that's
I just made it up, but
no, Steve, you're killing me. But anyways, you can only go in a square, right? And it has to be. We can't use wides, so like magnums or anything.
Mhm.
And they have to be fully submerged. Anything. So 220. So 110s are the only ones that can be out of water. They have to be touching the water. But they can be full. They can be completely out as long as they're touching the water. But 330 is completely underwater, and it makes it tough, man. It definitely makes it hard.
It eliminates a lot of sets.
It does, and
Yep.
the other thing too is that dive sticks are your best friend when it comes to that, because you have to get them to go under. You know what I'm saying? And that's the tough thing.
You have to make a decision, and that's so in my state they almost changed it fully submerged 2 years ago. It was
Mhm.
hanging on by a thread, because right now the way the law reads is it has to be in the water,
Oh.
right? So that's unless you're
Mm.
trapping on a public body of water, then it has to be under water. So, but that other, like I'm trapping on Farmer Joe's, it has to be in the water. And part of my biggest thing was there's a lot of sets where you don't need it to be submerged. I'm on the way back side of a farm field. No one else is going to be here. It's me and that beaver. I got to catch it for conflict, resolution situation. And if I force my set to be underwater, now I got to use dive sticks, and you need to make that beaver make a decision. So instead of it just going about its natural thing and interacting with the set, they show up and they got to say, okay, over or under. And now 9 times out of 10, they're going under.
Mhm.
But every once in a while, you get a really big beaver that doesn't want to dive, and they're going over. And now they're interacting with that set in a way that's not intended.
And that's a super tough thing. I mean, we use them, a lot of the times in channels where they have to dive, but it's tough because you do get that over scenario, or they get a snap scenario where now you've educated that beaver to not want to dive or go in that channel again. So now you have
Right.
to find something to do differently, and it's frustrating, especially in a nuisance situation, because like you're trying to, you're hoping that there's only 5 or 6 beavers in there, and you can get them in a couple of sets. You know what I'm saying? Because
Oh,
now
yeah.
you're going in there all the time, and now you're just waiting and you're educating those things time and time again. And it's the same. It's the same thing with dogs, with coyotes. You get a snapped set on a dog. Forget it. Like
Yeah.
once that dog knows that there's a trap there, you'll never catch that dog ever again. Like he's
Right.
gonna be one of the hardest animals to catch. Um, and it's frustrating. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's frustrating, but I get it too, because they're worried about dogs and other animals that
Yeah.
you're not supposed to catch. So
Yeah, and
it's
we, as trappers, we need to self-regulate just as much. And
Mhm.
statistically, bycatch of domestic animals it's statistically negligible. Like it happens so infrequently that it almost washes out in the data. But when it happens, it's tragic.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just have to avoid it. There's a zero tolerance for that. There, and there's always a story once a year of something dumb happening with a domestic animal in a trap. 9 times out of 10, it's an illegally set trap, or it's it's someone trapping out of season with illegal gear. They don't have a trapping license. It very rarely does a licensed regulated trapper end up in a situation where they accidentally catch a domestic animal. And so while I'm quick to remind people like, whoa, no, because that's a misconception, right? We place traps on the landscape and they just indiscriminately catch whatever critter walks by. Doesn't matter if it's a moose or a mink, it's going to catch it. And it's like, no, we use highly specialized traps. These traps are, based on placement, size of trap, the bait that we're using. We're targeting specific animals, and those are the only animals that we catch. I'll tell people when I'm running under ice sets for beaver, it is impossible for me to catch a bobcat. There is no bobcat that is going to swim underwater, and get caught in this trap.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're using highly specialized and highly selective sets, but mistakes do happen. And so, we just need to take it upon us to eliminate those mistakes and hold all of ourselves to that zero tolerance.
Well, when you're setting that trap, the first thing that comes to your mind is what could potentially happen. As far as, when you're setting, say I'm setting an MB750 on a dam set, I'm thinking about like if a dog walks by, like, or if a dog's swimming or whatever the case may be, like, what is the chances? Like, are there people around? If that's the case, I'm setting a 330 there instead. You know what I'm saying? Or I'm
Oh, yeah.
doing something to prevent the fact of being around. Or if you're setting, near somewhere, you just use an actual specific trap, or you don't set there. You know what I'm saying? You
Or
use
you
that.
don't set there. Walk away.
It's
Just
it's
walk
a
away.
out of sight, out of mind kind
Yeah.
of thing, and going back to what you're saying, it's somebody who doesn't have a trapping license, trapping with an illegal trap, doing something stupid, and those are the ones. There's bad eggs in everything. Look at the
Yeah.
people that are poaching deer. It's the
Right.
bad eggs. It's the you know what I'm saying. Like those are the people. I was out shed hunting last year, and we're not allowed to use snares. I don't know if New Hampshire allows snares,
No,
but
no snares.
we're not we can't use them here.
Mhm.
I was shed hunting, and I came up on a bunch of feathers, and I'm like, what is this? So I'm following this game trail. There's a turkey dead in a snare set on a game trail, and I'm like,
Yeah.
are you kidding me? Like,
Yep.
this is the stuff, and we're in a pretty highly populated area, and I'm like, are you absolutely kidding? And as I follow kind of through, and I'm on public land, which is
Mhm.
crazy, and I keep following through, and there's a cage set with and we're not allowed to use feathers neither. That's one
Yeah.
of attractants, no feathers. There's an attractant with a bird wing, and there's a cage set. So they're bobcat trap. You know what I'm saying? And I'm
Yeah.
like, are you kidding me? Like,
And those are the things that end up on the front page. Yeah. And so again, with everything that we do with social media, we try really hard. So the number one contributing factor as to whether or not someone is pro or anti-trapping is if they know a trapper. And it's like a crazy statistic. It's something like 80% of people that know a trapper are supportive of it. And so part of what we're trying to do with social media is give someone a trapper to know that isn't setting the snares on and again, that I wouldn't call that person you just described a trapper. They're a poacher.
No, they're a poacher. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
And so, but give someone a trapper to know and to get to know that is explaining all the laws, explaining all the rules, explaining why and how we do these things. I think that's really important, that trapping is a face in all of this outdoor media, and Meat Eater's doing a phenomenal job of incorporating it and just constantly kind of bringing it up and talking about it like it's not, the stepchild. Like, no, this is part of what we do. And I think a little bit more of that is happening today. And I also think that's why, to go back to something you asked a while ago, like why there's an increased interest is because we are seeing a little bit more of it and a little bit more of it talked about in more of the mainstream kind of social media channels.
Which I think is great. I think it's great for the population. I think it's great, there was times you were talking about before with prices of fur.
Mm.
So and a lot of the people that we all think of as trappers, my mentors through trapping from a young age were old timers that aren't with us anymore. But those were the guys that had taught me and brought me through it, and they were super into it. And I would run trap lines with them every day and get to know it and understand traps and learn the ways of a trapper. And those guys aren't around anymore, and those were the days of trap furs were worth a ton of money. And then as it started to die, then now we don't have a lot of people that are trapping fur bearers, which now you're seeing a decrease in other populations because of the lack of trappers that are out there. So it's nice to see that people are, putting their efforts forward to try and get into it. I'm a huge advocate. I mean, even if you're not going to beaver trap, or you're not going to take on coyote trap, and you're not going to take on you know, do some dog proofs, or some
Yeah.
specific, some some specific traps for raccoons or whatever,
Mhm.
cage traps, like
Yeah.
that's super important. Like you should be doing that as your due diligence for management of properties.
And at a minimum, support trapping.
Yes.
Even if you don't ever own a trap, when that legislation comes up, go down to, the Gold Dome in your state and stand up and say, even though I don't do this, we need this. This is part of health,
Mhm.
part of wildlife management. Trapping is the only tool that wildlife managers have to manage fur bearers. And when they don't have trapping, populations exceed their both ecological carrying capacity, but also their social carrying capacity. And so those animals need to be removed. And who does that fall on? The government. So
Mm.
you go from a user group who's willing to pay to resolve your conflicts to having to pay the government to resolve your conflicts. And so there's, in a landscape without trappers, it gets, things get out of whack quickly. This is a user group that's highly specialized, that knows how to resolve human wildlife conflicts, and they're important. And so even if you're never going to go set a trap, this is my little plug, get on Facebook and, support, or, email your state's agency whenever these questions are coming up. Say you're supportive of trapping, say you want to see, whatever increase it is, and just be outspoken for the trapper, because there's not a lot of voices for the trapper, and we need all the help we can get.
No, it's so true. Even just joining, even if you're not a trapper, but maybe joining some type of trapping activist group, because they
Mhm.
need the support, they need the people, because it's a dying thing. And it's sad to see. I mean, even like our local ones, we have a couple of them that, Connecticut Trappers Association and this, that, and the other thing. And like there are a lot of old timers, and it's not a lot of us young guns that are out there trying to be part of this and go to these rendezvous and all this stuff anymore. Like nobody's doing it, and it needs to be more. Like just getting, like, being part of it's super super important. And it's we trappers are the ones that are seriously under attack. I mean, from all angles. Like there is nobody that gets attacked more than the trapper.
It's the low hanging fruit, trappers and hounds. And those two user groups are just so important to wildlife managers.
Hmm.
There's a reason that every state allows trapping and hunting with hounds, and it's because it's really important. The anti groups have done a phenomenal job at throwing out just a lot of lies and getting those lies institutionalized in our culture. So like the idea of the big, bear trap that snaps and kills something, or you got to give PETA credit where credit is due. I mean, talk about a successful campaign, right? Like they did what they set out to do. And now it's on us to kind of combat that. And so, it's a lot of education. It's explaining how, again, all these traps are selective. No tooth traps are not allowed. No, the snares are not allowed. There's been literally millions of dollars spent on testing these traps by wildlife biologists and veterinarians to make sure that they're humane and ethical. And just getting that information out there is more important now than ever. And those groups that you're talking about, your local trappers association, they're kind of on the front lines. And so, yeah, spending the $35 for a membership each year, it's not a lot out of your pocket, but it's a lot to them. And when they go down to testify at the state house and they stand up and they say, We are representing. There's two, right? Here's two examples. We're representing 25 trappers, or we're representing 2,500 trappers in this state. Which one sounds more compelling? And so just having those numbers for them to report, this is how many people support our mission, and this is what our mission is really important.
Do you know what the really sad thing is? So every single year I do one thing, and I probably shouldn't, but I do it. I go on to public pages, and I just say, "Hey, it's beaver trapping nuisance season." So who knows somebody who needs to get beavers trapped or needs to get coyotes trapped or whatever. And I think it's a 50-50. Some people are, they're kind of anti-trapping, um, and those are obviously the crazy ones, right? But there's always a handful of people that have beaver problems, and they're like, "Yeah, come on over." And at first, they were like anti-trappers, right? And now they're like they have a beaver problem, and they like beg you to come over and trap. when they're in the
Everyone hates a trapper until they need them. And it's so true. And again, I just said this, but having a user group that has a skill set to resolve human wildlife conflict is more important now than ever. We're only developing more land. We're only fragmenting more land. We're taking our wetlands, we're pushing them in, we're streamlining them. We put roads through wetlands. We take an entire wetland complex, we put all the water of it through a 16-inch pipe. Beaver shows up and goes, "Are you freaking kidding me? How, you already did 98% of my work. Of course I'm just going to plug this 16-inch hole." And so having a user group that knows how to resolve those conflicts is very valuable at the community level and at the state level.
Jake, don't you know that with when you put those in, and then they can just use the what are they called? They have
Beaver deceivers.
the beaver deceivers. Don't you know those are the greatest things in the world? They stop all beavers.
Yeah, I love nothing more than filling my wetlands full of plastic and metal that get wrapped up in the first ice storm. Yep, that's that. So there is a time and a place for water flow devices. Don't get me wrong. You have some roads, you have some infrastructure where there's going to be a beaver here every single year, and with this device, we can level the flows. But it's like 10% of the time that they actually work. But the companies that are selling them, that are making $6,000 a whack, putting them in and saying, "Oh yeah, these will work forever, we promise," put them in, take their $6,000 paycheck, and then they never show back up. And now the town, the municipality, whoever it is who invested in putting that in, it's on them to deal with it when the beavers, again, it takes one big water storm, thing gets stoved up, and then the beavers move right back in, and now you have a mess of metal and plastic in your wetland, and you still have beavers flooding your road. So it's, those things work, but they work best in tandem with trapping. And this is why I'm always pitching the role of regulated trapping. I want to catch beavers before they become a conflict. Because once beavers become a conflict, now you have humans that hate the beaver, right? We don't want that. We want people to like wildlife. It's better for protecting land. It's just better for everything. So if I can stay one step ahead of the beavers, like especially in kind of my trapping zone, the first thing that we do each year when we're scouting for our beavers is we target high risk conflict situations. So I walk the railroad tracks. There's a couple town lots that I know of that they always flood the roads, and we'll go and we'll see. The dam is back and it's a small active hut on the back of the pond. Well, we're going to start here and remove those beavers. No one's asking us to. We're just staying a step ahead because I know what happens to beavers when they flood the railroad. They get a face full of number 7 shot when they pop up to fix their dam, and they float away and, rot in August when they're still young in the hut. So if I can remove them during a time of year when I can utilize the fur, I can utilize the meat, I can utilize the skull, the glands, the tail leather, everything, and resolve a conflict, everyone wins. But it's that, kind of Batman at night thing, because no one knows that we're trapping these beavers because we run a low profile. So again, everyone hates the trapper until they need them. And a lot of people don't realize the service that's being provided by the trapper until they're absent.
That's a great point that you bring up, because once people actually know that you're in there trapping, now you're bringing attention to where attention doesn't need to be brought.
Right.
So when they start writing articles and talking about all the beaver problems, now the light is on it by the wrong people who are then down there messing around with everything that goes on. So if you
Yeah.
just break it up from the beginning, that's super smart actually, honestly, because then there's always a problem. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And that's what you don't want. That's what you don't want.
Yeah.
So my question is, when you roll up to say a beaver swamp, how are you telling so that people know the newer ones, I guess, just kind of give them a little bit of information, but like how do you know that there's active, and then how do you know how many beavers are in an area by what you're seeing?
Sure. So if you have open water, it's usually, that the dam and the hut, they're going to have mud on them. They're going to have fresh, really bright sticks that have recently been chewed on. You're just going to see like this fresh activity. Even after 1 year of no beaver activity, things just get, I call it dusty, right? Like the sticks on top of the dam begin to turn gray instead of that bright color. And the mud begins to wash off. So you're just seeing some stones and the water's trickling over the dam. So that like heavy beaver activity and that mud on the hut is a good way to identify it when you have open water. But once things ice up, which is when we're doing probably the majority of our beaver trapping, things get a little bit more tricky because you can't see that sign. And so what we're looking for very specifically is a vent in the top of the beaver hut. So the hut is a house where they pack it full of mud and sticks and stuff, and they actually burrow. They pack the whole thing full first, and then they burrow in from the bottom. And they have chambers in there where they're sleeping. And because they're in there and active, their heat has to go somewhere. They're mammals, they're producing heat, and so that goes up through the top of their beaver house, and you end up with a little chimney. So the snow or ice on top of that hut will be melted in an area the size of a coffee can, and it'll be all crispy and kind of Jack Frosty around the top of that vent. We have a trap line dog that we bring with us, and he's surprisingly helpful at sniffing those out, because every once in a while you're like, we've been a cold snap. Is that a vent? Is it not a vent? And we'll send our dog up, and if he burrows right down in and wants to get in, we know there's beavers there. But if he just kind of takes a sniff and leaves, we're like, we'll move on.
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
Yeah, and as far as how many beavers are in a hut, so the old kind of traditional way is there's usually one beaver for every foot tall the hut is out of the water. So you'll see these, 6-8 foot monstrosity huts, and there's probably 6 to 8 beavers in there. Now, when you get into more complex flowages where you have multiple huts, that all kind of goes down the drain because they're sharing huts and moving about. But if you have a lone hut, there's usually a mature male and female, and then there's usually 1, 2, or 3 kits, which are, young of the year, and then a couple medium-sized beavers in just kind of your general beaver family group. And so when we're trapping, we obviously want to target the largest beavers because you get more utilization off them, but you also want to leave that younger age cohort to grow and get larger on the landscape. So generally speaking, the further away from the actual hut that you're trapping, the higher probability you have of catching mature beavers. So we start making sets farther away from the hut. If we catch the 2 mature beavers, we'll pull out, come back another day, unless we're doing conflict work. If we're doing conflict work, you have to remove all the beavers. But if we're kind of just, trapping beavers out in the wilderness, we'll try to take the 2 large ones and leave the rest. But as you get closer to the hut, your probability of catching kits or young of the year goes up. And so if we're trying to remove all the beavers, we'll start right at the hut and just kind of, pepper the whole place with sets and try to target as many as we can at once.
And when you're ice trapping, like what is kind of like when you get near the hut, like what is some of your avenues that you're trying to look for? I know like earlier ice, you're looking for bubbles and stuff like that and trails, kind of like where they're gonna kind of run to. But like, are you just kind of like going around the feed bank and trying to set there?
Yeah. So if you have black ice, you'll get these bubble trails. So when a beaver comes out of the hut, when they go into their hut, they're wet. They dry themselves off, they preen themselves, and they fluff themselves up. That's how they stay warm. They get air into their fur. So when they leave the hut, there's a trail of bubbles that, comes off them. And so you'll see their exact runs. We usually get 16 to 24 hours of black bubble ice, and then we inevitably get a snowstorm. So I love it. Like usually I get 1 hut a year where I'm like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. You get 3 inches, nice thick black ice, bubbles everywhere. It's great. But otherwise we're working with snow. And so I'm going to, first I'm going to always pick my way out, right? If you are on an active beaver pond in the winter, bring an ice pick and don't take a step anywhere that you don't hit first with that ice pick, because the beaver's activity under the snow or under the ice keeps that ice thin. And it can go from 4 inches to half an inch of ice in one step if you're in an active run. And so I'll pick my way all around, and then I'm going to try, just to kind of get a sense of where I can walk. And then I'm going to try to find the feed bed. And the feed bed is a bunch of sticks and trees that they've cut and stuck in the mud under water so that they have food throughout this, the winter. Because you think about a beaver, they're going to be locked in for like 4 to 5 months, which is just crazy. So they can have enough food for that. So they store all their food in the mud, and they'll swim out from their hut, grab a piece off the food bed, take that stick back into the hut, chew on it, and kind of repeat that action. They don't do a lot of activity other than that. So I'm going to try to find areas specifically, if I can. I'm looking for pinch points. Okay, from the hut to the food bed, where's a place that narrows down their movement? And I'll poke a hole, and you need a certain amount of depth to make a set. And so I'll poke a hole with my spud and say, okay, there's enough, this is kind of a pinch point. There's a tuft of grass here, and there's an alder here. And if I have 16 inches of water below me, I know that this is a run. And so I'm looking for those runs, and then I'm dropping sets in there. If I can just find a really, really active run. And when I look down through the ice, I'm looking for activity on the bottom of the water column. So if it's a murky bottom and it's all murky, it's probably not a lot of beaver movement, right? Because they stir things up. If you look down and it's that clear, just like river sand amongst murk, you're like, okay, this is hot. And so if I can block that off completely, I'll make a blind set, which is where you are just trying to get that animal to come through that 12-inch trap without any guidance, right? Like there's no lure or bait that's making them come here. They're just naturally, I'm going to go from A to B, and I'm going to go through this 12-inch hole. But finding those through the ice is usually pretty tricky. So we use a lot of baited sets. And so I use potatoes and aspen on the triggers of my body grip traps. I run Belials, and I would not recommend this set with any other trap type, because the Dukes and the Victors, they have the triggers are sloppy, and you cannot bait a trigger. So if anyone's used Belials, they just have their dog is tight. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's the tightest trigger. And I think Duke's coming out with a new full closure that looks very similar, and that may work. I haven't tried it. But yeah, so then we're putting bait on the triggers, and the idea of that is, okay, I can't narrow this large area down, but I know the beavers are coming through here. And so I want to direct their attention as they're coming through to my set. And the potato it's a curiosity thing, but it also plays to their interest in eating aquatic root vegetation. And so I don't know. We started using potatoes, and we hammer on them. I mean, it's my most effective under ice set. And so, yeah, potatoes, or as we get later in the season, aspen or popple is what it's also called, becomes really, really effective.
So on the trigger, if they have a Duke or something, what else are you doing then if you can't put it on the trigger?
Yeah, so if you're using an older style Duke or Victor trap, which has the dog is a little bit like it kind of sits up, it's a little bit higher. What you can do is you can take a piece of that. Unfortunately, you just can't use the potato set. That's just kind of
that's upsetting. No.
That is it. It is. I'd be devastated without it.
Run your traps tonight, I can tell you that.
Yep,
Right?
I'm ordering 24 new Belials.
And a couple sacks of potatoes.
Right. But the old Johnny Thorpe set where you take a nice, good, thick piece of aspen, probably a 1 or 2 inch piece of aspen, and you put it on the bottom of the jaws, right? Because those jaws are rotating away from each other. So you can put bait in between the jaws. And so you either wire it to the bottom jaw, or you pressure fit it in, take a knife and make a couple nicks in it so it looks like another beaver's been chewing on it a little bit. So you can still use baited sets. You just can't bait the trigger with those other traps.
So one of the things actually was funny is I was watching a documentary of Johnny, and he was saying when you put it on the trigger that you get more misses than you do when you put them on the bottom jaw.
So I think he did, because he didn't have Belials.
This is true. This
So
is true.
so
This is true. This is true.
so
Because they're a lot faster and it's
have you seen the slit in between the jaws of those full closure traps?
yeah, oh absolutely. Yes.
Right? You can't get a piece of paper in there. So this is what I think was happening back then. So I catch a lot of in these body grips, right? A hanging, and so it's called a swinging Susie is the name of the set. 2 pieces of wire, hang this trap. It's just in the matrix. It's in the water column, and I catch a lot, not a lot, but I catch enough that I'm very conscious of it.
Mm-hmm.
Beavers by front and back feet in my Belial body grips on baited triggers, but it holds them. And what it's doing is it's effectively, because a body grip is a killing trap. When you use a foothold on a submersion device, you're using their CO2 that they build up, and they pass out from that. So it's essentially taking a body grip and it's moving it. Once you catch a beaver by the foot under ice in a body grip, it's moving it from a body gripping trap into a submersion set. And so, which is fine by me, right? Like I'm still I show up, that
Still
beaver's
effective.
still there. So, but I do not bait triggers in open water ever. And like these are some of like the key points that I try to hit on, because we do a lot of baited triggers, and I want people to be informed when they say, "Oh, I'm just going to try to slap a potato on." Never do it in open water, because you will get front and back foot catches. Make sure you have a really, really strong tie off. And again, only do it with these traps that have a trigger that can take it. So I think he was getting a lot of, I think he was catching them on a back foot, but that Victor was not holding them. They were pulling out.
Right.
I caught a beaver by the tail in a baited trigger, and it held it in a Belial.
Wow.
I mean, there's like 3 inches of tail sticking out the other side.
They're scary to begin with. Try and set one of those things, and you think twice about it. Even trapping a ton and setting a ton of traps, and you're like, "Oh, this is."
Yeah, they're no joke, but they're so effective.
They're super effective.
I watched a beaver. I was walking to a set, and I scared a beaver off of a food bed. Like I was walking over the food bed, and I'm looking at my stick sticking out of the ice that the trap's attached to under ice, and I see it. I hear it fire, and I see the stick, and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, I think I just caught a beaver." And it twitched a couple more times, and it was about 25 seconds the twitching stopped. And I'm like, "No way." I gave it 10 more seconds, nothing. And I punched just a little hole. I'm expecting to see a live beaver, right? Dead as a doornail. These traps are so effective. They're getting that beaver. The way they're tested, the way these traps are tested, is the beaver has to reach, what's the term? Irreversible mortality within, I believe it's like 600 seconds, which sounds like a lot, but it's 5 minutes. And if you think about the natural world, a 5-minute death is pretty quick. These things are operating in sub 30 seconds, as far as, bringing that animal to irreversible mortality. And so it's just that I would never go back now after seeing how hard they hit, how strong they are, how effective they are. They hold animals in situations that you would have this is my pitch. I mean, and I don't know anyone from Belial. I don't think they're even in business anymore. I just want to be clear. Like, I'm not sponsored by Belial. But you buy 6 Belial traps. They're a bit more expensive. You buy 6 and you trap them for 1 season, and you will hold more fur that you would have lost in other sets to buy another 6 the next year. Like they just, if something, I don't end up with many sprung traps under ice that don't have a beaver in it, because these are just holding beavers in all these crazy ways.
That's how I am with my MBs. Like everything I run is MB, because for that reason, there's nothing that gets caught in an MB that gets away. I don't care what it is. I'm just so dead set on them. And Belials they're absolutely incredible. I used to have a ton of them. I loved them. They were the greatest things in the world. They're just a little scary.
You got to respect them. And I tell everyone, it's just like handling a loaded gun. I put a safety on those traps. That the second that I get those jaws together, a safety goes on it, and that safety stays on until right as I'm about to leave my set, safety comes off. And
And one of the things I tell everybody that I mentor and show trapping is you never wire off a trap until the safety is off. Plain and simple. I'm a huge advocate, just because we have to be fully submerged, right? So you dead set the trap, sticks, whatever you're gonna do, dive stick, whatever. Take your safety off, and then you have your wiring and you wire it off. Never wire on, especially if you're by yourself, and heaven
Right.
forbid you get caught in it or something. But I'm a huge advocate for that because God forbid something happens, man. And you
Yeah.
hear those one-off stories, somebody
Sure
does
you do.
something crazy and breaks an arm or whatever, especially in a 330. 330 is a little
I kept
vicious.
my biggest fear is getting hand caught in a body grip that's under ice.
Mm-hmm.
And I find myself, when Riley and I trap together the vast majority of the time, and it's awesome. I mean, the two of us are out there all the time, so there is that increased safety aspect. But when I'm by myself, inevitably, I'm working too fast. I'm moving too fast, and I find myself doing stupid stuff like chipping a hole to check a trap, and just reaching in to pull the ice out, and your finger touches the top of the trap while you're just digging in there, and it's like whoa, slow down. So yeah, just
Mm-hmm.
you just got to be careful, and you got to give them the respect that they deserve.
And it's that last minute second that when you don't respect them, that something bad is going to happen. And you just got to take your time. How many times do you set in a dirt hole set and you're not paying attention, you're skimming dirt and the 550s attached to your fingers. I mean, I've had it
Right.
happen a handful of times, or
Yeah.
a 110. I mean, how many times have you snapped a 110 on your fingers when you're rat trapping because you're not
Right.
you just like oh, I'll just throw it here, throw it here, throw
Mhm.
it here. You're not thinking about it. You're setting them and going, setting and going, setting and going. Next thing you know, there's a 110 on your finger, because you're not paying attention, and it's just
Right.
you just have to respect everything that you're putting in and going at it. So, well, Jake, I got one last question, man, and everybody can go and check you out and learn a little bit more from you. But before we let you go, we want to know what drives you outdoors.
Oh man. It's a religious experience for me that drives me outdoors. I mean, that's my church, that frozen beaver pond when the sun's coming up and everything's frosty and it's dead silent, and you can't hear anything but yourself breathe, and that little bit of tuft of frozen air that's coming out of your mouth, and the dog's running over to sniff a set because he's excited, like that religious experience where you feel yourself get a little bit lighter, like you feel yourself let go of a little bit. That's what drives me to get out there.
I can't agree with you any more than that, to be honest. Jake, do you have anything special that's like, it's getting towards the end of trapping season? You got anything cool on your site that you're selling that guys can go and check out if they're looking for some type of fur or anything like that?
Yeah, we're trying our absolute hardest to keep stuff in stock. We're so fortunate that we've got, a great group of people that have been following along with us and been trying to support us. And so we've been out of stock a lot more than I'd like. As soon as we're getting stuff up, it's getting snagged. And so I appreciate people coming along and checking that out. We do have some merch now that we're keeping in stock, and we're making our own beaver baits that we'll be offering. So those are definitely things that people could check out that are in stock. But if people are looking for custom fur items, please send us an email. You can contact us through our website, which is newenglandnaturals.net. Real simple. There's a contact us button there, and yeah, feel free to reach out.
Cool. And where can they follow along with all your videos and informationals and all that stuff?
Yeah, you can find us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at New England Naturals.
Awesome, Jake. Super, super, super happy to have you on. Thank you so much, man. And we hope that you have a lot more tight chains before it's all said and done. And hopefully we'll have you on in the future again and kind
Absolutely.
of talk about it a little bit more. So
Appreciate it.
absolutely. Thanks, Jake. And thanks everybody else for taking the ride right here on the Outdoor Drive.